Happy New Year. It is January 5th, and this is the first MSP Confidential of 2024. And I hope you had a fantastic holiday season, whatever you were doing, and that you've kicked off 2024 with a bang. I certainly feel like I have, and I get to welcome a very special guy to our very first MSP Confidential of the year, and that's Mr. Michael Goldstein from LAN Infotech. How are you, man? Good to see you.
Definitely good to see you. Happy New Year to you too.
Man, it's always interesting to see how much people talk about reflection and planning. The end of the year definitely brings this out, I think, organically, but also, a lot of companies are very much fiscal calendar year end. And so there's a lot of stuff that's naturally part of the company planning. So I see so much of that on LinkedIn. Everybody talking about their previous year and what they're doing the next year, the personal goals. Everybody's oversharing on LinkedIn this time of year as well.
Of course, of
So,
course.
as I was, of course, looking at a bit of your history, and I've known you for a few years now. But the thing I hadn't noticed is you've got 31,000, just about 31,000 followers on LinkedIn, and I was like, my mind was a little bit blown. Of course, being in business for 35 years, I'm sure helps a bit, but man, tell me a little bit about your LinkedIn story there because I feel like that's possibly quite good for business.
So in March, I'll celebrate my 15-year anniversary as LAN Infotech. I guess MSP version 2. And thank you. And 15 years ago, when I kind of restarted in the South Florida area, I realized that a majority of my customers were getting old like all of us. And you go back 15 years, it was kind of like the start of social media, and I realized that let me figure out a better way of advertising, and getting involved and getting out to meet people. So I would stay up, crazy hours at night, searching LinkedIn, figuring out who might be, a good target for us. And back then, there was no sales navigator; it was just getting
Mhm.
on the internet. So we developed a big following in Facebook in the early days. Once you got over seeing, what your friends looked like, 30 years later, I started looking for businesses. And as LinkedIn started, I realized this is really kind of cool. And I would just spend nights and nights looking at people that I'd want to get to know. And we started adding that. And, LinkedIn, you hit sometimes that, natural number of where you won't grow anymore. And, we started with content. It was really kind of cool. And, we're very social out there. We probably added more in, a chunk of it in the past 5 years of just kind of curating content. It also helped that I have my 36-year-old and 34-year-old sons working for me, and as they came in the early years, I realized, wow, their friends are all on this. Gotta find a new way to contact people. Of course, by the time everyone else figured out, we were already in there. So it's been kind of fun.
So would you consider yourself a social media guru at this stage, or have you kind of delegated a bit of that?
So, tools make it a little easier. Content from, you know, our vendors make it easier. I never say a guru because listen, before there's another platform out, right? There's
Mm.
another generation. You know, who would think 5 years ago you'd hear something like TikTok, right? And people would be putting funny videos, and now you got, big companies trying to advertise on it. So I think there's always something new. And I think we've all seen it over, just say, the 15 years of social media, right? Think of the things that didn't make it, MySpace, you look at all the other pieces that are out there. And every time I connect up with a vendor or you see a new startup company, you see another set of logos at the bottom of their web pages, and I'm like, what's that tool? So I wouldn't say guru, but it's fun. It keeps me in contact. I try on, I do focus mainly on LinkedIn for our business needs, but in reality, a couple of personal stories every so often that go up there. Sometimes, you can't predict what's going to be that viral piece that's out there, and you
Yeah,
never can.
you really never do know, and I have observed, interestingly, and perhaps funnily, that the things that seem to get the most traction in my LinkedIn are just sort of the casual personal posts with a selfie. An airport selfie seems to be the popular thing.
No, you're
And
you're in
so,
that you're in that group, that traveling group. There's a handful of you that are famous for those airport selfies.
well, you're no stranger to the travel, my friend, because you get out to a lot of the events. You definitely very present with a lot of the vendors, and I feel like I see you sometimes more than I see my wife in any given year. But it's really great to see you at the events because I think this community of vendors is not just the vendors, but also some of the relationships with MSPs and seeing a few of the same people. It is kind of like a little family, and it's awesome to sort of reunite, reconnect every time we get to an event. And it's such a great opportunity to just catch up on what's happening in business. It feels like MSPs like yourself are obviously ear to the ground, understanding what's happening with the small businesses. What are some of the transitions and things that are, being felt a little bit more specifically and organically on the ground? Because, from the vendor perspective, we can only make certain assumptions of the things we hear, the things that our people are willing to share with us. And so I think, with that idea in mind of what you're hearing and what are some of your business owners talking about, where are some of your struggles and challenges with them to get them, from point A to point B? Love to hear what some of your 2024 focuses are in this regard. What are you trying to really get your clients to move more dynamically and intentionally with?
Uh, uh, you know, the two words that come to my mind, or I'll actually say two topics. Obviously, AI. Everyone is spitting out some word of AI, and we're just not giving up on cybersecurity. There's still doors to close that are out there. There's still a lot of people that are you know still have the idea that it won't affect them on that side. But AI has been probably the most exciting thing that's there, and we're kind of on a mission to go out there and talk to our customers about you know AI isn't ChatGPT. AI
Mm,
really kind of isn't Copilot in a way. Those, or Bard, we kind of look at it that it's really transformation. We've gone through this in multiple parts, multiple times, probably in both our careers that are in place there, and we want to explain to them that AI can really solve some problems, and like anything else, is it for you or is it not for you? And understanding that in that chat gpt world, we're the hamster in the wheel being observed and we have to grow out of that. So it's really been an amazing piece to go out there and talk about it. I've been a programmer for like probably 35 plus years. I'll be nice to myself, and I explain it to people that are in the that we've always had the basics: if, then, else. If something happens, then you do this, and then if you don't do that, you do something else. And AI is just taking that to the 100th dimension. If, then, else, and we've been seeing this for a while, but we got to paddle, we got to paddle downstream with people. You can't find it
yeah.
upstream.
Well, and AI is such an interesting just conversation at all levels of the MSP ecosystem right now because, obviously a ton of the MSP vendors are starting to put AI into their products and leveraging some of that. I'm starting to see it pop up in all the business to business tools that we see here. Hey, here's an AI, assistant to help you write a better post on LinkedIn. And it's interesting to see how some of those things are pretty obvious in some cases. But then there's sort of like the underbelly of AI too. Um, I have a couple friends on LinkedIn that are musicians, and one of them has been experimenting with AI, where he's like, "Hey, can you with DALI, can I get a cutaway of a bass guitar or a cutaway of a piano?" And so clearly, AI just has no understanding or concept of what a cutaway of one of those instruments would potentially look like. Even cutaways of vehicles, like there's no understanding of the concept of the vehicle. And then the other day, I saw somebody on LinkedIn posting or Instagram or somewhere the guides from OpenAI directly of some of the ways to engineer your prompts for better accuracy or just more. And by the way, where I'm getting to is this idea of like where MSPs connect the tissue here for the end customer, because I think customers to a certain extent will want or expect a ready-made solution where AI is concerned, infallible to a certain extent. And so the MSPs kind of are putting a little bit at risk by saying, "Hey, we think you should use this," but then, if it's not delivering perfect outcomes, then suddenly it's the MSP's fault, like everything else. But anyways, the guide to prompting was interesting because one of the things that OpenAI said was, yes, the models will make stuff up if it doesn't have information to give you that is accurate, or if you don't provide it with references or don't provide it with information. And so, like, my question is, do you think we're going into a brand new era of disinformation potentially here, with people expecting that OpenAI or any model of AI is providing accurate data and information? And how do we help our clients understand that risk?
My first impression last year, as we all jumped on to ChatGPT and we started playing around with it, is that for the grayer generation, it makes us smarter. For the younger generation, it makes them dumber because it doesn't let them go out and do things. I go back to the old Novell days when I actually had to figure stuff out, pre-internet, maybe CompuServe dial-up boards that you could talk to people, but not,
Yeah,
do a search or ask a prompt and assume that that's always right. So I think
the
you're right.
proper email lists from the back in the day. Yeah,
So I think that it's a learning curve. I'm super excited, where Microsoft's driving it these days. In their last online partner conference, Copilot Studio, the ability to help build something up, but then put bumpers around it or borders around it, but also monitor it. So if you're a large company that built an application for your team, for the company, you could see how the prompts are doing and actually monitor what's going on and feed better data sources into it, because maybe you needed more of a large language model. So I thought that, and I'm bringing this up to our customers so that, just like you said, we can't expect the right answer that's out there. And if you build something custom, and it doesn't have to be super custom, low code is out there, you have a way of making sure that your company or your employees or your customers are getting the right data from something that you provide. So I think we're, at the infant stages, but it's going super, super fast. And you're right, there's a lot of potential for misinformation.
yeah. Well, the trends that come out typically into the end of your year, we did a little bit of that ourselves in the Ignition event that we hold in mid-December. One of the trends that we saw, obviously, is AI. I think everybody understands how just ubiquitous the conversation around AI is today, but I think there's still an opportunity gap of where the customers can effectively deploy an AI strategy, and how the MSPs can help in that, I guess, connecting those gaps. And so I'm curious, sort of, how are you thinking about I guess, in that sense? Because it's one thing for you to be a voice in front of your customers, so that when they do want to do something with AI, they're coming to you and not your competitors. That's one aspect of it. If you're not talking to them about it, somebody else is. But there's really also, like, how to actually get into the business outcomes side of the AI discussion. And I'm just curious, what if you've had any of those actual more, I guess, detailed conversations with some of your customers?
So we have, and thankful for the Microsoft marketing machine, because everyone expects Copilot to be, up, running, and on their desktop. They really don't know what they're asking for, and they're really talking about, they're really waiting for Copilot 365, so you can say, hey, search my pictures, make me a Florida Panthers PowerPoint presentation where I was in the arena, like that kind of thing, and that opens up the door to them, kind of, I guess, learning to spell AI, and then talking it through and showing them some things, so we use those. I try to stay away from the, hey, let's go into ChatGPT and let me show you. We're trying to figure out how we can get this. So we have had people, when they ask that question, it leads to meetings that they've actually done some research. And when we separate the parts, and I kind of view that, AI in the world for me as an MSP is, where's the data? How do I host the data? And then
Mm,
do I code to get it? And who's that middleware that I'm going to use? For us, it'll be Microsoft. So when we kind of break that up, and in the end, it's no different than anything else. I need to know what you're trying to accomplish, and in the Copilot 365 stuff that we're seeing from Microsoft right now, because it's not fully available for all of us. It's probably, I haven't touched it. It's just for the large companies. There's a lot of preparation that they want. just like anything else, in our legal practice, we do a lot of document management. So great. If I didn't have security on the documents before, and now I suck them into a system, and now by accident, someone could find the needle in the haystack, whose fault is that? So I think there's still a lot of prep of, you got a lot of data that's out there. You can't just plug it into something and then have everybody have access to it. So we're having those conversations around security. Simple piece, large implementations of SharePoint. Do you understand how your security is in there? Have you looked at it? Because now, by a simple, sentence, someone might be able to find, salesman compensation or partners bonuses if you didn't build this right. So we also gone up that route. And then we have had a lot of people come to us saying, I got this great idea. And we don't code. We've partnered ourselves with some coders. We're looking at a new product, actually by a familiar face. If you just look up online, Hats AI. You know, we're looking at different things that can make us smarter and give more tools out to the customer. And I think that we'll probably be, at some events talking about how an MSP can make money. And in reality, it's great. If someone had a great project, maybe I subbed it out and maybe it's 100K in, one-time programming costs or something along like, we want to turn this into a service so that we can actually do a longer term piece so that maybe I can help them host the data. So it becomes a very complex kind of discussion. And I love it because they challenge me, I challenge them, and it takes multiple meetings. And now we really become the expert because we're on something that it's almost like being on a skateboard. You're not sure when you're going to hit that curb, when
Yeah.
you can do that jump. But it's been really an exciting time. We hit some of those plateaus at some points in our careers, and now we're at that base camp and we're trying to get to the top.
So I guess the openness of the possibilities is really interesting to me because in the last couple of weeks, I had Joel Abramson, who's one of the partners at Top Down and is on the board of ScalePad, and he's been leading a lot of the M&A that we do at ScalePad. And so one of the things he talked about was it's really difficult to engineer outcomes, but one should always try to plan to have an end in mind or an outcome in mind. And then personally, I started. I wanted to spend more time studying the Stoicism philosophy and the Stoics. And so I'm reading the Daily Stoic, and one of my exercises for 2024. It's the first time I've set like a year long thing that I'm going to do every day as a personal goal. But with the thing that came up today was specifically around outcomes and how a lot of people are maddened not by the lack of outcomes, but by the confusion, I guess, or the or non-understanding of where we're going. And so it also again spoke to having this end in mind of anything that you plan, anything you're building. And OpenAI seems to kind of go in complete opposite, diametrically opposed, of having an end in mind because we have no idea where this is going. And so I'm curious how you think about AI just in the context of your business planning. And I get that there's layers and levels probably, but just your thoughts on that because it's just blowing my mind.
So you're right. It's we can't ride that wave. That wave's just going up too fast. It's really kind of interesting, and I think a lot of people have some precept concepts. Skynet. iRobot. We all think that if we give some control, but not realizing that in some way, shape, or form, we've probably been using AI for 5, 6 years in some piece. We've all shopped online this season. It was Mr. AI that said, "Hey, you left this in this cart. Let me give you another 10%." There's not a little elf in the back that's going through this. So I think that we're trying to get people to get above the fear. I'm above the fear, and I like the ability of we never really I know in working in law firms for 35 plus years, I can't just search and Google something and then kind of say that's the law, right? And I think that's what we've gotten up to in this, and we got to tell people what happened to the old proofing of things, validating the data. So I love the where we could be, but we have to harness it. And it was kind of shocking, probably was it mid-year we had, the big wigs go up to Congress and say, "Hey, we really got to try to hold off on the AI," and you're the guys that put it out there. So it really is kind of interesting to see, where this is going to go. I don't think we've ever touched something in my IT years that have just been like fire like this. You look
Yeah.
at the actual numbers. I think I was reading an article that they were talking about, OpenAI possibly thinking of an IPO could make them $100 billion company. So I just saw a little blurb on that. So it definitely is scary to me on that side of it, just because, like you said, when you see, the Google CEO on a 60 Minutes show, and in the end, as they do a query, he says, nah, that he didn't use the word that was made up, but you see this stuff and the potential for where we are just in the world. But I was at one of my clients probably a month ago, small young architecture firm, and in reality we had this conversation. They're not super technical from a technical space, but what they did is they've embraced a lot of the Autodesk AI. And one of their niches that they started over the summer is that many times, just like when people say, oh, I need a computer network, I need something, we have to do a little work. And they've been using AI to do some initial modeling to give the customer or the prospect an idea of what they might want. So they're able to, and it was like the coolest thing for me to say, you give them a couple ideas, they're able to rapidly put something together so that we can take from what we're envisioning in our mind and building something and just putting it on a screen as a starting point. And it's been, their business, jumped crazy just in the fourth quarter for a lot of those kind of contracts. So I use that as a great kind of value of
Mm.
where AI could go and people thinking just ahead.
I do love that because I find that my own use is very much in the unblocker category primarily. And I do tend to think in frameworks and stuff like that, but it's often tough or difficult, and this is where procrastination is born, to start a new project or a new initiative or a new framework or a new idea. And I find that ChatGPT can often just very, very clearly and succinctly unblock the sort of the flow of the ideas and the creativity. And so I had the chance to use it for everything from a quarterly plan and breakout of OKRs to even an 18-month plan to, it gives you very specific ideas of what to do at month 3 and month 6 and month 9. And so I think the opportunity for businesses to leverage this kind of stuff, even in casual, initial brainstorming levels of things could be just incredible. And I think we haven't even tap the tip of the iceberg at this point. But wow.
You're right, because it gets those creative juices going on that side of it. For our client base, because it's a majority a Microsoft base, we have been pushing them over to, Microsoft had the long word 4 months ago, Bing Chat Enterprise, and now it's, Copilot Preview, just to have that little bordered area and to, get used to seeing the green check mark so that you're protected. So that way, if by accident someone put up a company list of a prospect list and said, "Hey, can you clean this up?" It's not publicly out there on that. So I think you're right. It's good to get them to understand. And then listen, we're IT. We all know what we're doing, right? But occasionally you don't want that one person in your organization to take something confidential and feed it up into ChatGPT. So I'm all for the engines, but I think the borders so that we could so something by accident doesn't happen. So
Mhm.
I think that's the part that I'm big for the corporate versions. I see this at that point, and of course, it's interesting to see how courts, government, state, local, everything figures this stuff out as to how we're going to regulate this. That's the bigger piece that's in place there. That should be interesting of how all this works out. I'm not for or against it. I just know that hey, if I had my stuff publicly showed up and I wasn't getting royalties on back of that, there might be an issue. I'm not that kind of person, but I think there's a lot of legality that also has to get worked out.
Yeah. Well, nobody is that kind of person until they are, and it's interesting how these things tend to sort of grow their own tails. But let me pull up to 30,000 foot view again, because I think what's interesting is in our space, and I was an MSP for 18 years, and so I understand firsthand how challenging the shiny object syndrome is. And this is definitely in that category of shiny object. I mean, the opportunity is massive. We were having the same conversations about cybersecurity, 5 years ago, and I think most of them have started to settle into a clear understanding of what is the dynamic, what is some of the planning, where are some of the risks, what are the conversation types we need to be having, and so we're now entering that discovery period with AI, which is super interesting. But I think it's easy for a small IT focused, or business focused MSP to perhaps get distracted easily by a shiny object like AI. And I'm curious, as a one of the dare I say elders of our community, Michael, what are you doing, or how are you thinking about the grounding and keeping your baselines, clear and concise for not only you and your customers, but also for your team? Because I think it's easy for people to lose a bit of their minds, kind of with the distraction of the new stuff, right?
So, I always, I go back pre-pandemic, and I do a lot of local public speaking. And if you ask me to come in and sit on a panel that might be talking about infrastructure, in the end, I talk about cybersecurity. So I say all roads lead to security. So for me, I look at it as an opportunity to discuss with our customers. It's the hot topic. And as we go out there, I have a ton of public speaking things within the community this year, and the hot topic is AI. So in reality, I do my pitch. I show them I'm not against it. I bring up the borders, but then I kind of lead up that this data could be used against you. So in reality, we're still keeping straightforward at this point. Luckily, even if Copilot was available to us, because it seems to be the most popular piece, it's end user based. There's no real training. I sell a license. I go out there, and we're clear that we're discussing how this fits with our customers. And if somebody really had a project that was in place, we'd handle part of it. Because listen, in my world, they're going to need some storage, they're going to need some compute power, and someone's going to write the code. That writing the code might not be me. So we're preparing our staff understands it. Everyone plays with something. We encourage our employees to use Copilot, in the chat in the Bing Chat Enterprise world, and not on our networks. Use ChatGPT. We encourage our when engineers get asked the question, let them know that, hey, this is the potential downside of things, but I'm not worried yet, because I think that there isn't a clear path, because we're not a programming type firm. But I think it's a great opportunity for all of us in the MSP space to get a little more educated on your flavor. And there are a lot of local organizations, depending on what your vertical, that it is super hot to be on a panel, talk about marketing, talk about what we use it for, talk about some of the products that we think, because it's that buzzword. But in the end, I end up on those security words. So it starts up there, the shiny object that's in place. I give a lot of great knowledge, and every week I verify my information, because we all know that this stuff
Yeah,
changes on that part
very
of it.
quickly.
And I still have my tips and tricks and cyber warnings. I go through this week in breach, because I say on both sides of this, because we do some work, with InfraGard, and we're involved with the FBI and Secret Service. These tools are great. Now take your bad hat on. My favorite reading is kind of like the spy novels that are out there, those kind of things. Now these bad guys have this great tool just like us, and now that multiplies what they can do. So I always kind of do the good and the evil on that side of it, to let them know that if we're all better protected, now I have a way that, we don't want to have a way that these guys can find more information about us, even though that's where the world goes.
Tom Lawrence put up a great meme on LinkedIn this week, which was, your business is not too small to be hacked. It's just too small to be featured in the news. And so I think that really tells an interesting story still of like how much small businesses trade in newsworthy information, whether they are a risk themselves in sort of that equation. And I'm always, this conversation comes up regularly, and I'm always interested just to hear different people's viewpoints on it, because I'm always curious how much, if at all, you struggle getting the point across to the various types of customers. If there's certain verticals or industries where security is a little bit more um, prominent or dealt with more respectfully than certain sizes or other businesses in different verticals. And curious what your experience has been.
Regulated type industries, one of the things that, we've been finding is we've actually got involved in a lot of, NIST type pieces for customers, and they're across the board. We just finished a project with a company that makes turboprops for the Air Force, and the Air Force required them to meet something like NIST. Also, inside the state of Florida, the state is I'll say asking right now, but pushing that all state and local municipalities start conforming and at least putting plans to have NIST standards in place. So I think that, very low hanging fruit, which is good. You know, they flip out when they see the price, on that side of it. But in reality, when they go to one of those big firms and see the price, they realize that, we got a great piece. And then, the other piece that we're looking at on at least this side is getting them to understand that just because you are compliant at 12 o'clock on a Monday doesn't mean that 12:01 you're not you're still compliant. And it's more like almost like a religion that you have to go through.
Mm.
You have to change your policies and procedures. So, that's been a good piece. And in reality, we try to give real life, down to earth companies that we find that have had issues that are reported to show that, there's no pattern to this. I think when we had Colonial Pipeline, we had that meat company. And we joke saying, "Yeah, when it affect your gas tank and you getting your hamburgers, then everybody paid attention."
Yeah.
And we start showing that it affected the bottom line. Look at the holding company for Vans and Timberland that got hit. Their stock tumbled 3 days later because the bad guys went out and hit the processing line, so they couldn't deliver their Christmas orders. So we're kind of showing you that they're not dumb at what they do, and they go out there, and this could affect bottom lines, even if you're that small guy. What do you say? And I, in the legal industry, you go by any courthouse. It could be any courthouse in any city. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of law firms within that 3 mile radius. Sometimes you'll be in a building, it could be filled with all these small law firms. So if you knew that that guy got hit, you could just take the elevator up or go down the hall and knock on another door. So we're trying to bring it up that you don't want to be that small news story or, in this little group to find out that you were hacked. And then in those industries, they're responsible to report. I like that the SEC put something in place that, we had to go out there. I like and report within a certain amount of days. I like the FTC regulations that came out because they're not asking for crazy things. They're asking things that we all should know if we were the consumer and we all talk about as an MSP. So whether you're anti-government or not, these are the things that you got to do or else.
Yeah, it's frustrating to me that that is literally the whip that is required because, I think we're at the stage where most small businesses know what the right thing to do is in terms of protecting their business, their data, their customers' data. Yet the non-regular industries are just kind of, in the wings waiting for somebody to tell them they have to before they actually make a move on this. And so it's going to create this long tail of a transition, obviously, because not every industry is going to jump in at the same time. This is going to take decades, generations potentially of sort of a meaningful change happening. And so it's just an aside. It's a little bit of the frustration that I feel where, we'll talk to a business like, well, are we required to do that? Then why would we spend money on that? Well,
Like,
because, your security. Well, yeah, we'll deal with we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Anyways, and so those are, I guess, some of the short-sighted decisions that small
I
business
think
owners need to be hearing more about.
I think that also we're kind of, across industries, we've actually seen that it's not just a cyber policy that are asking for a lot of these things. In certain, instances, depending on the provider, it's professional liability insurance. It's just general liability insurance. There's a small section that, you need your IT guy to figure out. Like they don't know what a DMARC is. They don't know what an XDR is. And I think, I see it on a lot of the new insurance applications. They're specifically mentioning products, which is great because
Yeah.
now, yeah, I told you about that product, but you didn't want to pay that additional premium that's in place there. So I think, it is kind of at epidemic levels of this. Every day there's someone else that got an email phish, they fell for it. So, we've been talking about this, like you said, 5 years is a minimum. Probably been talking about security 10 years, but it wasn't this proliferant on everything. So we've gone through and we redid, some MSAs last year. And as we've made it a big mission to finish up probably by March 1st, reissuing MSAs to everybody. And we are evaluating everyone's network. And when they decide to do this, when I send them and I tell them that we'll send them the updated MSA, we do have, hey, and you've turned down these services, please initial here on that. Because, and then you get people that are really pissed off. And I'm like, listen, you walk out in front of a bus one day and the next guy comes in and you get hit, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, why didn't we have these things? I hate to say it, we're in this world, and we've had a chunk of people go out there, or we had a few people that got pissed off and looked elsewhere. But in reality, I can't have that liability. I think all of us can't have that liability of the guy that still has some WinXP running, or Server 2008 sitting on your network, or unpatched firewalls. There's a lot of these things that are just low hanging fruit. So we're just taking that aggressive approach.
Mhm.
And it's frustrating when a client leaves because of that. And you go in place there, but we can't have it. We had, we picked up a customer. It was a good profitable piece where they had a breach, but it killed my help desk because now I had to throw more bodies at it. So now we're at the stage, and I want to make sure that as our staff sees customers potentially leaving, I do run meetings to go out there to talk about this, and I explain to them, we can't afford to spend another 10 days or a 10-day piece remediating and bringing them back from the dead if they didn't really want to protect themselves. And everything that we were offering a lot of these small businesses are on a per seat, per month kind of basis. It's not like the old days where you'd have to drop $50,000 into a solution, you'd be married to that. So we're not asking for a tremendous amount of money, but we want them to better protect themselves in English. This is what it is. And if they're not, I send them a note or I go up the chain.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts. Rob Bowles from Blockworks. Have you met Rob?
Yep.
He has this great line that I caught just in a random conversation one day. He says customers have to participate in their own rescue, and it's so true. And even from before when we were talking a bit about compliance, if you have you started doing compliance as a service in earnest, you're helping customers manage the whole compliance process front to back. That's one area where it's so evident whether the customers are willing to participate in their own rescue or not, right? Because I think we've come from obviously a long legacy of just things being handed over to the IT provider, delegated, so to speak. Hey, take care of this for me. But this is not where that is at all. Compliance, the customer has to change processes, implement HR policies. They have to stand up a security committee. They have to really actually be involved and have a priority in their goal setting around this. And I find it kind of catches them by surprise. The few times I started to have some of those conversations, they really just weren't ready for the time investment that was required until there was a sale on the line. And so as soon as they wanted to work with a potential prospect of theirs, and that customer was, oh, we need you to be ISO 27001 or SOC 2, all of a sudden it's like, stop the presses. We got to get SOC 2 compliance. So obviously the carrot is the thing that sometimes works, but in the compliance as a service realm, I wanted to ask you a bit of your experience in getting customers more involved in that conversation, and where you've seen opportunities to help them sort of make that transition from a mindset perspective. Because it's definitely people run into a bit of that brick wall here and there, right?
In our public service announcements and various things, we always ask if there's regulated, industries in there, and we use them to talk about that and how they have their needs in place. But you're right, until they get smacked in the back of the head that there's something big. Like I will tell you, this last one we just did, they had a November 30th deadline to file, and we started that probably 60 days before. We have a compliance service. We use a third-party source to be able to be the consultant, but we have a tool that we go in there and a compliance pro to go out and manage it. But we've set the expectations up front that, hey, listen, this is not a one-man team that has to be out there. And part of the presentation docs that we talk about is what the cycle is and the people that are involved. And I always tell them, IT's the easiest thing. We drop some agents on there, we find the things, we fix them. In this last one of the questions was for the Air Force certification is like, do you have a floor map? I'm thinking, where's this going to go? Floor plan. And they're like, yeah. And then they're like, hey, do you have clearly marked where cameras are monitoring? It was just going along that whole stage of things. And I was like, wow, it goes through the detail of that. And, they didn't have an offboarding process. So, and we're explaining to them that, everything depending on which cert you're going for is a matter of points. And if you choose not to do these things, no matter what you'll do, you'll never be at that compliance state. So, and we're telling them we're not giving you a certificate. It's an ongoing monthly tool that goes out there. And in reality, when someone asks for this, you can't email them 1,000 PDFs and kind of say,
No.
here, here's policies and that kind of stuff. So we're letting them know that either you're in or you're not. You're going to have this portal. You're never going to get rid of this portal. It's going to be a monthly fee because it's going to contain your documents. And we're trying to say that, hey, listen, if you're serious and you're big enough, and even if you're just going for cyber insurance, they're going to ask now. So you have to start putting this in something in place there, because the insurance companies are the ones that go out there. You checked off, yes, I got SPF, I got DKIM, I got DMARC. It takes them 30 seconds to look at this. So I think that that's the biggest thing that we go out there, that we have to tell them that this is a process and it can't
Mhm.
happen overnight. And you're going to have to build these things, which most of them you should have had. This last one, chunk of it is documentation that they needed, that they should have had, that you probably have. You can't just say, "Oh, here's my employee handbook." So I think it's a good sales challenge to go out there. It's profitable. And this last one, it was good because I'm not the MSP. I actually got to sit back on the camera and watch and listen to them and hear the guys grilled and go through this. It turned into that now they want someone like an MSP because their MSP said that they can do this. And my sales pitch was, listen, we've partnered with third party experts to handle this because it's not just tech. We want to help you maintain it once you identify the pieces and
Yeah.
document what you meet. And it was really kind of cool. So we have a couple of these under our belt. And you're right, unless someone needs it. I will say that, inside our legal practice, which is big for us, a lot of the law firm's customers are asking for certain certifications that are in place there. You know, if you're, malpractice, large pieces that are out there, you're maintaining HIPAA records. They're not asking for full HIPAA, but, we're seeing that the customers are asking questions. And now when you represent, we all want a lot of big logos on our resume that's in place there. And the law firms do also. But when you're picking up, one of those, Fortune 50 companies, they're not just going to give you the case. They're asking a lot of things to go out there. So in that space, we are educating, and it's not just, hey, I'm just going to have somebody run a little external pen test of a free Linux application, and you're going to be there. It's more to that. So it's kind of an evolving piece, and it's good. And I tell them that some things they're asking are really crazy that are out there, but 80% of it you should have in the first place.
No doubt. Well, and I think the legality of it too, since you mentioned legal, and I had Brad Gross on the live stream a few weeks ago at IT Nation. We did it live from we found a little quiet corner. We just sat down and had a conversation, and he brings up a bit of that sort of when customers have said no to something that's is going to bite them in the behind when the insurance company comes knocking. And one of the things that was super interesting, and a lot of people don't realize this, is don't ask your customers to sign it, because if they don't sign it, then it could be viewed as they rejected that statement. And if your website said you offer all these all-inclusive services, then you put yourself in your own pickle of saying, you had said that this was going to be included. The customer didn't sign your rejection notice, therefore it should have been included. And he's seen MSPs, get slapped on the wrist and potentially pay fines in that situation. So I guess my non-legal advice is to go listen to Brad talk about that on the IT Nation episode, because he really lays out very clearly how cool it is to simply say, hey, we're notifying you that you declined this, and there's no signature required because this service is no longer included. And on the flip side of that is how important is requiring a signature on every single quote for every single offer for everything that you do for the customer, because it works both ways. You know, the things that they maybe later say we didn't ask for that, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, I think in the realm of legality, again, everybody's a pal until they're not. And as soon
Yep.
as there's a problem, the customer, the first thing their lawyers are going to do is like, yeah, we need to sue your MSP, and they're no longer your friend. So I think
I
there's
think it's
important.
important. And I've always said, the first thing, in 30 plus years working with law firms, we all meet as MSPs. You talk about your vertical and you see everyone's face, when you say your law firm or, you go out there and you work with doctors, everyone has their preference. And what I've learned being an expert witness, working with firms all the time, is it doesn't make a difference if you're right or wrong. You have to pay to defend. So in reality, we're always kind of checking those boxes off as we could. And sometimes it could come down to 5 words in your contract, and that could be a difference of you win or it costs you 40 grand. So I listen to Brad. We have a few others that we go out there, and I think you know, it's one of those things that I definitely don't sit there and deal with the online, let me do a
Yeah.
contract kind of on that side of it. And we can't take the advice of, and I say this, you can't take the copy of, your friend the MSP in California because the Florida laws are different, the New York laws are different. So I always say that we pay to review things. I always call up our attorney to be sure on that. That's like IT. You got that pop up box that maybe they're asking for Bitcoin. Are you going to call up your dentist and ask them how to handle it? So in reality, we want to be sure that we're getting the right advice. And you're right. I think that everyone has to look at that, and everything is good until those papers are served, and then the world comes to
Yeah.
an end.
Hey, you can have ChatGPT initial that first review of the legal document.
And one
uh,
time
my,
One time in my MSP career, I was looking to save some money in the early days, and maybe I used one of those online contract services, without negating anyone. So I put it all together, and then later in the year, my attorney asked for a bunch of things. He goes, "Where the hell did you get this? Don't ever do that again." It was one of those things. And he pointed out to me, the basic clauses that I should have. And, luckily, we're able, it didn't cause any pain and suffering, but I agree. You want to go to a specialist that understands your industry, your business, as well as the laws in your city, county, state.
yeah, definitely. Man, I can't believe we're literally at T minus 10 minutes to the top of the hour here. How time flies when you're having fun. We're gonna have to make sure we sit down at one of the upcoming events and continue the conversation. But I always like to close, or I'm trying to do this more regularly, but close with a rapid fire round of questions to learn more about you and some of the things that make you tick. And so some of them I've heard in other places where the people do sort of the rapid fire questions, and some of them are really interesting. So if you'll indulge me, I have a few that I'll throw your way. So the first one is super simple. What's the best sandwich?
I am a turkey club kind of person.
Turkey Club. Okay. What's one thing that you own that you really should get rid of?
I own a ton of sports memorabilia. You can probably see some albums in the back, but I'm looking
I
at
do, man.
baseball, all that kind of stuff. My wife just, it's all that memorabilia. And I guess it's always the question, and I hate to go on a rant, but my wife's like, what are we going to do with it when you're not here?
Yeah, eBay. eBay. You do a Gary V, and just probably each item probably will have a ton of value in a number of decades or whenever. But have you, speaking of memorabilia, which is a perfect segue, have you ever asked someone for their autograph, or what is your most memorable autograph experience?
My most memorable is I grew up in Queens and I went to school on Long Island. My wife and I met in college. We were driving. We stopped at a Nathan's Famous in Oceanside. And what happened was, is as I'm waiting for my wife to come out, Billy Joel comes out, gets on his motorcycle right next to me. So I still have the paper. I only had a legal pad, in my car. I found the pen, and he looks at me, he goes, "Hey, can you hold my fries? Don't eat them. I'll sign the autograph."
Oh, that's incredible. I asked Joel Abramson the same question the other day, and he's like, "Yeah, I was at this restaurant once. I waited outside for hours to get an autograph from Michael Jordan, and he came out and he didn't sign the autograph. I think he shook his hand, but he didn't sign the autograph, so he doesn't have an autograph to show for it." I was like, "Man, that's the most disappointing version of that story I've ever heard."
I still have that piece of paper, and I will say that I went to a memorabilia show. I had my who's now my 34-year-old. We waited. We saw Willie Mays walking out, and my son took a picture with him. So we're at the table with with people there, and they're like, "Hey, why didn't you go and ask? Why don't you go and ask him for an autograph?" So I walked my son over. It's in one of these bar pubs, and Willie looks up at my son and he says, "Hey, didn't I take a picture with you? Wasn't that enough?" And he takes the little bar pub menu, flips it over, and signs Willie Mays on it. But it was, one of those.
Wow,
He was charging for signatures the next day, but what do I know?
wow. Um, I feel like you're probably at the interesting stage where you tend to give more advice and receive it, but I'm curious if you've ever received a really bad piece of advice that you remember.
You know what? It was probably sell that stock from my father-in-law. you know,
Oh
on that.
no.
So probably one of those. But you know what? I always value getting together. Always value these kind of things. I value, our peer meetings that are out there, and I'm always open-minded. And I always give advice if asked for on that side of it. But I'm not one of those that are like, you got to do it this way. So I think it goes both ways on that side of it. I don't think I've gotten that advice. And listen, now we all have our AI friend that we can check these things on, right?
Yeah. Well, and on the heels of that comment of you got to do it this way, there's another great rapid fire question, which is kind of a little philosophical. It should actually be in the long discourse series of questions. But is there anything that you've rethought recently? Something that perhaps you were really a strong, careful believer in that maybe you rethought, reconsidered.
I hate to say it, and I don't want to bring it up this way, but our political status these days. You go back to where we had all of this decor, and everything goes out, and kind of all goes out the window. I think that when I look back on these things, social media is good and bad. Now you have that one little platform where anybody could say something, where before you had to have a policy and a procedure to kind of go up for things. So I think that's where I look, where I feel like the world has changed, and some things were better in the old days. A lot of things are better in today's day and age. But I think we got to look at all those things with a grain of salt, and depending on how old
Hmm.
we are.
Yeah, that's fair. It's interesting. In Canada, we tend to follow the U.S. political, news cycle more than we do the Canadian one, just because so many things tend to follow in lockstep with whether it's economy-driven things, or just the news in general. Obviously, it just takes a lot of the news cycles, and so I find I actually know more about the U.S. political system per se than the actual Canadian one, even. But it's always interesting to see those shifts in dynamics, and I think it always just the equalizer of the conversation I hear every time is, if we can just get along, can we just have a civil conversation about this? And I think that the challenge is really that when people can hide behind that screen, I think it just creates a lot of filters for the ugly, the underbelly to come out, and it's tough. You had to go into a town hall and show your face and be accountable to the things you said, and those things are quickly changing and going away. And so hopefully we can get back to that accountability of the self, because I think it just makes for more wholesome, life and conversations and relationships in general. But
I agree
yeah.
with you. It's super important, and we take that in our business well, because listen, everyone's a big person behind that email, and I always sit there and say to staff, listen, you know what, pick up the phone call, or let's schedule an appointment, because listen, everybody could write that email, right? I hate you, all these kind of things. I want to cut that off on that same piece. I want to go in and see someone, or I'm gonna. It's easy today. Let's do a Zoom call. Let's do a Teams call. Because I think you're right. It's easier to hide behind that veil to go out
Mm.
there than to say it in person.
All right, we're down to the last two questions. The first one, is there an MSP industry buzzword you'd be happy to dispense with?
So in dispense with, you mean get rid of?
Mm,
Oh my God, yeah, there's too many to think about, so I'll take a pass on that. But always, I'll take the good ones and the old ones that are out there, and we always try to do the right thing on that side of it.
yeah. By the way, there's too many is the correct answer, I think. So there you go.
There
Um,
are. We sit there and we, best practices. We're looking at a lot of what is your standard operating procedure. I mean, there's a lot of different words that go out there.
the last one, and this comes often out in the form of advice, but is there something that you learned in your career that you thought, geez, I would have loved to have learned or known about this at the beginning of my career instead of way down the line?
So in the middle of my career, I was changing. I used to work for CBS Financial, and I did some work. And I remember that recruiters back then, talk about in person, had me go and interview for a large power utility. And I remember that the guy says, "Don't worry, I'll lead you through it." Read a couple books. I walked in, and within 7 minutes, the interviewer just ripped me up, and in reality knew that I didn't know what I was talking about. So I do carry that on. It was in the middle of my career that you can't BS your way through. You got to be the real thing, and if you could do it, you got to answer honestly. That's in place. I'm not saying I didn't answer honestly, but it hurt me so bad that I let someone influence me to go out there and say something that I'm not. And I always want to be straight shooting. I always want to make sure that I go out there and do the right thing, community focused. And I wish I would have spent a little more time in community. That's why
Mm,
in LAN 2 for us over the past 7 years, we've dedicated a lot of our time to helping our community and understanding the community that we work in. Because I felt like I didn't understand that, hey, what does that mean that they added a new crane to our port? Well, that means that, hey, more money comes in, which is pretty simple, but now it converts other problems in place there. So I think everybody needs to get involved in the community that they work in and live in.
yeah, no doubt. Well, the community piece is something that is so front and center in the MSP industry too, and it's not just obviously MSP to customer facing, um, but I think MSPs definitely feel the effect of community within our MSP ecosystem. And it's interesting that not more MSPs are doing the client-facing community thing, and that's something that definitely stood out from some of your work, whether it's the South Florida Tech Hub or I heard you on an interview. I forget who this was with, but you were talking about some of the work you did with some uh, children with disabilities
Yep.
and the internship program. And so, like, kudos, man, for really sort of embracing and embodying the whole sense of community. I think it's just you're leading by example, and I think that's great for the whole industry. So I appreciate you for doing that.
No, and I appreciate everything that you've done for us as MSPs. As you came in through your last few companies, obviously, where you are today helps us on those type of things. And I truly thank you for everything that you do. Shows like this.
Oh man, well, it's always great. I think this is. I was saying on the New Year's one with Joel that I kind of did this a bit selfishly because it was my excuse to bring on people that I wanted to continue learning from and hearing about. And so you've certainly provided a bit of that learning opportunity for me here today, and I hope everybody else feels a bit of that love too. And thank you for making a bit of time on a Friday afternoon for you, which is probably beer clock where you are. It's only about 1 o'clock here, but six in a row for the Panthers. I think it's worth getting excited for over the weekend.
We are super excited. I'm a little tired this week because I do stay up and watch those West Coast mid games that are out there. Last night was a big win, and I share my passion for the Panthers. I have four grandchildren. The 4 and 3 year old love it. So I kind of share it with family. But it's kind of fun, and sports is a good icebreaker for our customers too.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, I look forward to seeing you at one of the upcoming events. In the meantime, keep well, keep leading by example. Good luck in 2024, and hope to maybe catch up with you again later in the year.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you.
All right, man. Well, everybody else, thank you so much for joining us today. This is Michael Goldstein from LAN Infotech in the Fort Lauderdale area. And Michael, I know you're a happy receiver of questions and commentary. Go check out Michael on LinkedIn. We can add to his 31,000 follower count. But yeah, I know you're always willing to help people out with their questions or comments and just have a conversation. I think that's exactly the thing that drives our community so well. And we'll be back next week. We have a ton of interesting guests. I typically post on Tuesdays with the guest of the week. And we're here every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern on MSP Confidential. You can also go catch the recordings of previous episodes on the ScalePad YouTube channel. In the meantime, Happy New Year again to everybody. We'll see you in the next few weeks. Ciao.